The purpose of this experiment was to find the immediate effects of singing in a choir on stress. And the way that they did this was they gathered 70 participants in a university choir, and they used quantitative research to find their stress levels. So the first thing that they used was the PANAS test, which stands for Positive and Negative Affect Schedule. And it basically is a 20-question test that measures your positive emotions and negative emotions. So with the positive effect, we're seeing emotions like strong, determined, excited. And with the negative effect, we're seeing emotions like distressed, scared, and hostile. The next test that they use is the STAI test, which stands for State and Trait Anxiety Inventory. And this test just is a 20-question pre and post test similar to the other one, but this one measures your state and trait levels of anxiety. So like anxiety for that day, but also like your overall anxiety for your life, if that makes sense. And then lastly, they took saliva samples and measured the amylase protein in all of the saliva samples. So it has been shown in previous research that as a result of like stressful situations, there's typically an increase in this protein in our saliva, similar to like cortisol. But there had already been a research study with cortisol, so they went with the amylase protein. So that was their 3 ways of gathering data quantitatively. The participants that they had consisted of 70 choir members, 44 female and 22 male, and they left it up to the director to decide how to split them, but they were split into 2 groups of 35. And then from this, the first group, the control group, would show up for rehearsal, and they were told, okay, we're actually not having a rehearsal today. You get a free period. So they kind of just did whatever for that hour in the classroom. They did not sing. And the experimental group was the other 35, and they did sing. They did their 10-minute warm-up session, and then for the remainder of the hour they rehearsed what they had been previously working on. So there wasn't any change to the rehearsal, but the control group just did not do anything at all. So from this, they were finding that there was a decrease in positive effect from the PANAS test for the control, and an increase in negative effect for the experimental group. So I'm going to try and make a little more sense, but basically feelings of like happiness and excitement decreased in our control group, and feelings of stress and being afraid, those decreased in our experimental group. The control group also saw an increase in negative effects, so more feelings of being stressed and afraid, etc. Levels of the state anxiety decreased for the experimental group and increased for the control. So we see that there was anxiety decreasing with the group that was singing and increasing with the group that did not do anything and participate in rehearsal that day. As far as the amylase protein, the results were not significant, so they couldn't be contributed to whether or not they were singing. But there was an increase in amylase in the control group and a decrease in the experimental group, but again, it wasn't significant enough to tie it to singing or not. That being said, there were some things to be concerned about with this research, or just to look out for in the future, like if this type of experiment is conducted again. One, the control group showed up for rehearsal thinking that they were going to rehearse. So they kind of, and in the experiment, it even says that it was exam week. So these students are coming in, probably really busy schedule, and they don't have any reason to be there. So that could have also affected their like negative effect in the PANAS test, because maybe they were frustrated or angry because the hour was kind of wasted. And then also there was only one time that this experiment was conducted. So it was just with one group, one time. And so there wasn't a lot of data to like compare, in my opinion. I would have loved to have seen like more groups. They also mentioned like comparing age and gender and stuff in terms of stress levels, but this couldn't be done just because there wasn't like enough differentiation between the ages and genders that were present. One more thing, but this was interesting. They did find that third year students had higher amylase protein like in their saliva than second year students. So that was just a little tidbit that I found interesting. Like maybe they're just more stressed because they got more going on in their third year. But yeah, so that was my research article. It was very interesting to read. I hope that you learned a lot from my summary.